Hey everyone, and as I just mentioned, we have the next session following up the entire narrative of today's CMO track. We have our next speaker, Matt Hines, founder at Hines Marketing and probably one of the most seasoned B2B marketers. So as we spoke, we all are dealing with the pipeline pressure today. Everybody is looking for the solutions, and um, that's why we invited Matt just to hear his perspective. And his keynote will be all about the 2026 GTM Reset. With that being said, Matt, thanks a lot for joining us. Passing mic to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much to both of you. Thank you for everyone for being here. Would love to kind of hear where everyone's joining from. I am here in the beautiful Pacific Northwest on the west coast of the United States, and a little early. It's 8 a.m. our time here, but excited to be here and excited to share with you a little of what I'm seeing in the market. So appreciate that intro, Andre. I get to spend a lot of my time talking to B2B go-to-market leaders, especially B2B CMOs. And especially over the last couple months, as things change so rapidly in the market, as technology changes, as go-to-market trends change, I'm realizing that there's quite a few resets that many leading B2B CMOs are following. And so I wanted to highlight what those are. This isn't necessarily in a stacked ranked order, but I wanted to walk through a little bit of what I'm seeing, and hopefully some of you have some questions along the way. I'm happy to take questions at the end. I'd also be happy to take questions while we are doing these in sessions as well. I find that sometimes the more interactive these are, the more interesting they are for you, the more fun they are for me. So you don't have to hear me rattle on just for the next 45, 50 minutes. So, all right, with no further ado, let's get into it. This may seem like an obvious thing, but I find that very few companies do this strategically. And it's the idea of doing less. Too often, we are simply adding more work to our plates on a regular basis and saying, doing more, more, more. And we're not eliminating the things that aren't working. For a lot of companies we work with, year is a year of subtraction, of not trying to do 1,000 things, but picking a small number of things that are working very well. Let me give you an example of this. We have a client that does a pretty extensive event strategy. They do a lot of field events. Some of those are events that they are doing on their own. Some of those are events they do through other, through third parties, through industry associations and whatnot. They have a rule that an event has to generate 10x in pipeline created for them to do that event and for them to deem that that event was successful. So like, let's say you put $100,000 into an event. They expect $1 million in pipeline created associated with that event. It's a pretty clean bar. It's a pretty clear bar. It's something that the CFO and all the way down, everyone agrees. And so by having that number in place, it gives the team the latitude to be able to try new things with a clear set of objectives. Now, it also requires a broader approach to events, and we'll talk a little bit about that a little later, so I'm not going to steal my own thunder. But the idea is that if it doesn't work, they stop doing it. They have an evaluation of all the marketing they're doing and have a high expectation of how it's going to perform, and they really invest in the success of those programs, knowing that some of them aren't going to be successful. Simply having this program in place provides a high level of credibility with your CFO, with your board. It provides a foundation of accountability that actually ends up freeing you to do more things, to try new things, but continue to cull what's not working. It's better to do fewer things that are predictable and repeatable than to continue to throw more and more spaghetti on the wall. We also are talking a lot, as you would expect, about AI. I imagine several sessions in this summit have been around AI. Here's my take, or the angle I want to take on this. We're well beyond experimentation. And we're beyond now. The leading organizations are no longer just saying, I'm giving my team tools and I'm hoping that they use them. We need to be moving from AI as tool sets to AI as infrastructure. The gap is widening, because a lot of pilots, what people call pilots, are really just random uses of AI. Well, we bought Writer for everybody, or we bought ChatGPT, and we brought in a trainer, and we trained everyone how to use GPT, and we showed them the art of the possible. And so we're really hoping they just all sort of get on the train and help with that. You'll find some people do, some people don't, some people start and then stop. Adopting AI and leveraging the real opportunity it has as infrastructure requires a level of work design and revenue orchestration that many organizations don't have. I would argue that the presence of AI is exposing the lack of workflow and process that many organizations don't have, that is keeping them from being successful. And so when we don't have the results, what do? We find the next shiny object, we keep buying more tools, and we keep trying new things. And now we're back to the first slide, which is a problem of just doing too many things. Instead of finding the 20 plus things you could solve with AI, and believe me, the list is endless, find one or two problems, one or two constraints that represent rivers in your business. When you have an industry conference, that's like once a year or once, a quarter or whatever, your leverage of AI to improve media management, to improve content production, lead routing, lead enrichment. Like, there are some real constraints and real opportunities in your business that are daily rivers flowing through your marketing efforts. One of those areas is where I would recommend starting your efforts with AI, and really dig in and embed it in your workflows. Take whatever the process is today, whatever your content development process is, or whatever your webinar management or your podcast production, whatever you pick, like, break it down to the jobs to be done. And think about, where can I have agentic help with this? Where can I automate some of these pieces? Every good copywriter I know hates to write, right? They're paid to write, but they hate to write. What they want to do is edit, right? Okay, build that into the workflow and make sure you've got agentic tools that are doing the tedious work, the tactical work, so your people can focus on what humans and what our brains are best positioned to do. So it's a different way of thinking, not just about AI, the tool. Like, if you've heard me speak before, you've heard me say a million times, strategy first, process second, technology third. This applies to AI as well. Collaboration drag, independent of AI, is killing marketing teams. So if we're trying to do too many things and then we keep applying tools to the problem, we have a real problem, right? And Gartner has actually done quite a bit of research around this. Gartner calls this collaboration drag, and they've identified that companies with a high level of collaboration drag are generating 38% less revenue, or 38% less likely to hit their revenue targets than companies that are actually operating more efficiently. You're slower to market. You can't get things done in the time you wanted to get done. You've got frustrated, burnt out people. 2 years ago, Gartner said that collaboration drag was a top 3 problem for CMOs to solve. Last year, they named it the number 1 issue for CMOs, keeping them from being successful. This again gets down to work design. It's not the sexiest topic in the world, but as we increase the complexity of the way we go to market, as the way we sell, as the way that people buy becomes more complex, more steps, more people involved, the random acts of marketing simply doesn't work. If I were to just ask you a simple question, how many meetings does it take to produce a webinar at your company? Most people's heads explode when they think about just how difficult that is. Most companies don't even have like a process defined for what that looks like. What are the steps? Anthony, too many, right? So I hear immediately everyone just says too many. But if you try to get under the surface on that, why is it too many? No one knows. And in some cases, because no one is owning the overall process, steps get added. Well, Sally wants to review this, and we can't do this unless we run it by IT. And each of those individual steps makes sense in isolation. But when you combine them together, all of a sudden, it takes you 9 weeks to do a webinar when it should take you 3 days, right? I mean, that may be a little too extreme, but sometimes there's no alignment. Sometimes there's just no understanding of who needs to do what. If you don't have a Racy or Daisy involved that sort of identifies who's responsible, who's accountable, who just needs to be informed, who are the people where this really should have just been an email, where they just need to know what's going on, but they don't need to be in the meeting or don't need to be in the decision-making process. Define these steps for your organization. This is workflows. This is taxonomies. This is understanding who's doing what. It's really not rocket science. I've got we've got a number of tools. We have a CMOs guide to marketing orchestration that sort of outlines a lot of these steps and gives you a pretty good blueprint for how this works. If you want that, feel free to ping me. Happy to get that to you. And Andre and team, I'm not sure if I gave you guys that specific doc to hand out to folks afterward, but I'm happy to do that as well. But this really is a silent killer for companies that want to get better at adopting AI as infrastructure, that want to be more productive as the complexity of our go-to-market increases. I'm looking for any questions in the Q&A, any messages. I don't see anything yet. I'm still just talking, so if anyone has any questions as we go, worst case, like Anthony, thank you for your comments. I'll just reference what you're saying. So at least I'm making you kind of halfway part of the presentation. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going here. Yeah, thank you. Signal-based orchestration is becoming more and more important as well. And this means a couple different things. First, it means that we need to not just work in channel silos, but actually orchestrate our campaigns together. Most B2B organizations are not built to do this well, right? We have a field marketing team, we have an email team, we have an agency doing digital ads, we've got a PR team doing a bunch of comms over here. And they all are working under the umbrella of the same marketing organization and ostensibly the same strategy, but many times they have their own themes, their own cadences, their own calendars, their own editorial calendars. And so what happens is if you're a prospect, you're seeing a lot of different things in the market. You're seeing a lot of different messages that don't always align with each other. Orchestrating that behavior across channels on your team is really, really important. And apply that now to the way we think about all the data and the signals we have coming inside and outside of our market, inside and outside of our company. Let's just take an event. Let's take an event like this, right? Whether you showed up for the event or didn't, the fact that you registered means there was some intent, right? If someone downloads your white paper today, you shouldn't call and say, thanks, John, the white paper. Would you like to see a demo? The answer is probably no. How about this? Thanks for downloading that white paper today. Why the hell did you do that? Right? Like, what was compelling about that topic that made it prescient right now? What's going on in your organization, in your business that made this topic interesting right now? So if I'm an SDR, I want to have that conversation first because that helps me understand the why before I can talk about the how of how I might solve for that. But now imagine you have those same kind of signals that you're seeing across your business, in your content, engaging in your marketing efforts, coming to your event, how they're engaging and where they're asking questions at the event. In the chat, what are they saying as a pain point? Already, I know that Anthony probably has a pain around orchestration. How would I follow up different with Anthony versus someone else if I knew that was a problem? Hopefully not with a pitch, hopefully not with a request for a demo, right? But it's like, hey, I saw in the comments, on the event that you were interested, that you mentioned that this may be a problem for you as well. Here's some additional content, or Matt mentioned the CMO guide to marketing orchestration. Here's a link to that. You may not be ready to, Anthony, you may not be ready to buy anything right now, but the way that we follow up with you makes it just a little more likely and a little more likely that the next time you do have a problem to solve, you're likely to go to someone you trust and respect. I call these value deposits. I actually think that a BDR or an SDR, some of them should be deployed far earlier in the buying process, not to set demos, but just to be the most valuable people in the world. Hey, I noticed that you were talking about this in our user community. Here's some content for you. Hey, I noticed this comment you made in Reddit that I thought was really compelling. I wanted to make sure you saw this perspective that one of our customers had that is a peer of yours, right? I mean, there's a million different things you can do, but orchestrating that on as automated a basis as you can so that your digital channels are applying it correctly. But even if it's not automating that, what is the checklist that you're giving your sellers? What is the checklist you're giving your people that can reply to that on a regular basis? Again, getting a little back to workflow and orchestration here. But the age-old question we always have for salespeople, who do I call next and what should I talk about? Right? It's the same question I have for my automated follow-up workflows in my digital channels. Right? Shouldn't be the same thing to everyone. Shouldn't be the same drip campaigns that everyone gets. We have the opportunity now to personalize at a one-to-one level. This is another example of those rivers we need to be building in our business, that this happens every day. There are agents that exist today that can do this for you if you build these and deploy these. Pretty huge and exciting opportunity where we're at right now. I mentioned events as signal engines and not just moments. A lot of times when we do events, we kind of just do them and kind of move on. An event like this, okay, we put all this effort, and Andre and the team all this work, and I know we've been talking about this for weeks, right? And it's finally here, and we do this event. And too often when you finish this, you take a quick break, you go to the bar and celebrate, and then the next day you're working on the next event. Right? We do this all the time. And the super busy field marketing teams, it's a sprint to the event. It's a sprint to the next event. I've got some clients we work with. I'm not going to name names where, we are coming into the busy spring event season, and each event is treated as a summit, right? I got to get through and get this one done. And then 2 weeks later, I got this one, and then I keep moving on. And we're not looking at those events as such a rich opportunity to gather insights and actions to customize what we do for folks. For example, we do a series of B2B CMO breakfasts around the country in the US. We try to get 25 to 30 CMOs in the room for breakfast to just to network, to learn, just a light moderated conversation amongst the group. Great way for people to get together, get to know other marketers in the room. And we always have a sponsor. And so sometimes we'll have a theme that the sponsor wants to talk about as well. So it's not there's no pitching. There's no real explicit talk about what the sponsor does, but we talk about the themes and the problems that customers have that they solve. So to get 25 to 30 people in the room, we need to get 40 people committed to attend, because we always get drop-offs. So it's kind of has this equation. We get 40 people signed up, we get 25 to 30 in the room. To get 40 signed up, I need to have a list of at least 200, 250 CMOs, right? And that may feel like a small conversion rate, but in our case, we've been doing these long enough, we've got some credibility with these folks. So anyway, I've got a basis of 250 people that I think have some interest in coming. If people say they can't come but wish they could come, that's just as good as saying they want to come from a mindset standpoint, right? If they registered, that's an even greater signal. If they register and attend, that's a greater signal, but you still can market to the broader group. Now, what if in the room, I'm listening? If you go to the doctor today, a lot of doctors, I was at I can't remember where I was the other day. I was at a doctor's office, and they turned on a recording device. Actually, it was at the veterinarian. Turned on a recording device so we could record the conversation, and AI summarized that and help put that into the notes. So what if you told people, hey, listen, we're recording these sessions, we're listening to this, and we're going to listen to what people say, and we're going to use that to identify explicit ways to follow up with people afterward, right? Your success of your event, that 10x you get in pipeline, doesn't come from the event itself. It comes from the whole body of work around it. I mentioned that client that has that 10x goal for generating pipeline out of events. When they leave the event, they're usually somewhere in the 1.5x range of pipeline created. 8.5 times X that they expect to get and more comes in the follow-up. Right? We're not closing deals and creating pipeline at the event. If you have a networking event, if you've got an activation, if you're taking people to Topgolf, if you're taking people even to the Paddock Club of Formula, whatever it is, don't bring the projector, right? 3 steps is faster than 1 sometimes to get to where you want to go. But think about the investment you make in those events as a moment in a broader program that can create countless signals for your organization and opportunities to further customize and further deepen the trust and respect people have for you. I feel like we got a few more comments here. Andre, is anything worth sort of addressing here as we move on?
Let's pick up this question from Jacob about the insights that you have mentioned. Is it done manually, for example, looking at signals, or automatically? And are you gathering all the signals in one dashboard?
I think of it less as a dashboard and more of as a workflow. Some of those signals, I guess you could track the volume of signals, but I also want to see responsive signals, right? And some of those are going to be activated in an automatic way through your digital channels and through email sequences and through your agentic workflows. Some of them are going to be checklists that I ask the SDRs to follow up with, and then I can see in their engagement tool, whether that's Outreach or SalesLoft or whatever it is, I can see what they're doing. I can also, the other value of having a dashboard like that is you can start to segment the signals by topic or by subject. Are certain signals or are certain topics more efficient at getting engagement and response from prospects and others? And what does that mean about how to customize some of your other follow-ups or your other workflows afterward? So I think there's a lot of ways to do that. I think that too often, I think a dashboard is meant to just reflect what happened. I think the best dashboards actually are meant to be sort of give you a set of actions of what to do next. What do I do based on this data, right? So it's a bit of it should be directional and not just reflective. Hopefully that helps.
Absolutely. It's just, honestly, I posted maybe a couple of days ago about the same story. I see the new trend on LinkedIn. A lot of marketing leaders just share, okay, I spent the entire weekend in Cloud Code and I created this new dashboard. But then my question is, so what? Like just having access to data is not a problem anymore. Having access to data, to signals, we live in abundance of this. The problem is, what am I going to do with this, right?
Exactly.
And is my next action actually aligned with the intent that the account or the buyer is showing, right? What could add value? What could help us to facilitate the nurturing process? As simple as that. So the data without understanding of how to leverage it properly is useless.
Yeah, I mean, another thing I think is very painful to a lot of marketers is the scope creep of reporting and scope creep of dashboards. And then all of a sudden it's like, it's not automatic how those dashboards get put together. So we spend a lot of time like building the reporting, which is not like productive. Like anything anytime you're spending time talking to each other in the business is time you're not spent talking to your customers and your prospects. If you look at your dashboard today, you should be able to say yes to these 3 questions. Does it tell me something interesting? Do I understand what that means? And can I do something about it? Right? What does it say? What does it mean? What should I do next? Whether it's a positive or negative sign. If you can't answer that, if it doesn't matter based on that metric, then that metric isn't as valuable as you might think. Right? So have a bar for what you're looking at, and make sure it's stuff that is actionable for your organizations.
So
yeah, Adita, so I call that success theater, right? Like if you have a dashboard where all you're showing is like the good stuff, like that's not actually valuable. And I think too often we do that in leadership team meetings. We do that to the board. A good board doesn't want success theater. They want to see the biggest warts. Like I've had board members constantly say like, my job in this meeting is not to beat you up. My job is to help you address hard problems. Right? Like I'm not in the business every day the way that you are, but like I've seen this movie many times and I may have an insight that can help us uncrack this. Like if everything's going well, you don't need us. So let's pretend everything's going well. Let's dig into problems. Just like my first slide and talking about like, addition through subtraction. Like if you come to the board and if you can build that kind of relationship with your board, with your leadership team, it unlocks a ton of trust where they'll start to believe and give you latitude to do and try more things because they know you're thinking about it with a greater level of sort of business discipline. All right, watching the clock. I got a bunch more I want to get through. So
let's move forward.
Boy, this is an important one. Trust and proof are really driving win rates right now. And I think that, this is really important to remember as we continue to accelerate adoption of AI. Until robots sell to robots, until robots buy from robots. And we're seeing some evidence that we may be moving in that direction. But I think we're primarily seeing that in lower stakes, more transactional purchases. When the stakes are high, humans are still involved. And our lizard brains are trained to find and follow people we can trust. Where and how are you building credibility for your brand, for your people? Where and how are you making it easier for your prospects to say yes to you? One of my favorite sales books right now is the Frame Making Sale. It's written by Brent Adamson, and he wrote The Challenger Customer, The Challenger Sale. So familiar name to many people in B2B sales. And the most important point he makes in the Frame Making Sale is that customers need to have confidence in themselves to move forward with you. A lot of our proof, a lot of our case studies are focused on helping them have confidence in us. confidence that we know what we're doing, confidence that we can deliver results. But if you flip the mirror around and you think about like, what do we need to do so the customer has confidence in themselves, in the decisions that they're making, in the things that they're prioritizing, in the results they're going to generate. Even ask prospects, like, where do you have a lack of confidence right now in your own strategy? If you build that level of trust and get that level of vulnerability, you open up a real conversation. But I think your prospects have to have confidence in themselves first. So when you think about driving trust and proof, make it less about you and more about them. Help them see themselves in their peers. Help them see themselves in similar situations where other companies are further along the process than they are today. I think you have to adopt this perspective, because otherwise what happens is we just regress back to sort of talking about ourselves, which we do too often early in the process and we do too often late in the process. The decision is always about your customer and their confidence and their trust in themselves first before they trust you. Maybe more of a philosophical point here, but I find that the companies that do sort of pivot and make this change and go in this direction see far greater success. This is not just about reporting. It's funny, Andre. I mean, I feel like we've been talking about, account-based go-to-market forever. We've been talking about buying groups forever. And yet you look at almost anyone's CRM and you look at their opportunities, there's usually one person at the prospect company associated with that. So we are single threading on a regular basis these deals. It feels easier. Look, I got my hook in one person and they seem really interested, and I'm just going to really focus on them. This is more than just having an account-based mentality. This is really working the entire buying group. And the technology we have available to us now allows us to think far more broadly and creatively about what that buying group looks like. So you always have some senior decision maker, right, that probably doesn't want to be involved in the majority of the buying process. The sales literature calls that person Vito, the very important top officer. My dad sold Caterpillar tractors for 35 years, and he liked to just go to the top and talk to the president of whatever the company was. And in some cases, in some industries in the past, like that may have worked. In most decision making today, you have a group of people that need to reach that consensus and commitment to change, that need to have confidence in themselves individually as well as a group. There are decision makers, there are check writers, there are people with various vested interests in the outcome you represent that have different perspectives and different needs. Head of HR, CFO, benefits director, 3 different roles, all evaluating a similar system with different criteria. You got to address the individual criteria as well as you address the group. So this is more than just tracking accounts versus leads. This is also making sure you are tracking momentum and velocity of the buying group itself across those deals. Lead volume, I still think, is largely a vanity play. We don't even track, we don't track leads at all at Heinz Marketing anymore. We look at 3 metrics. We look at sort of current deals, current deals for the quarter. We look at pipeline created, which is a metric that shows us that next quarter is going to be okay. And we look at target accounts engaged as our 3rd metric. We don't look at leads. We look at target accounts engaged. And we look at 2 things there. One, we want to know that the companies we believe we should be selling to on a weekly basis, we're getting enough of the people in those companies engaged in our content, whether they come to an event or they read our webinar or they watch an episode of Sales Pipeline Radio or whatever it is. I also track how many people at those target accounts are engaged in our content, are engaged with our sellers. So I want to see account progression. I also want to see account saturation. More people that are talking to us, more people that are believing in us, even if that's not a deal I'm working on right away. So, when we have deals in motion, we're always trying to make sure we have those multi-threaded as early as possible. But that target account engage metric is not something I'm tracking the things that's going to generate this month, this quarter, or next quarter. Like we're sitting here at the end of Q1, my target accounts engage is really what I'm looking to make sure we're going to hit our number in the second half of this year, given our sales cycles. So thinking about that buying group, thinking about the account orientation, but also buying group saturation, maybe sort of my geeky way of talking about multi-threading, but something worth thinking about to ensure you're setting up that faster consensus building inside. Kennedy, I'm looking at your comment here. Yeah, I think that this is where, I mean, again, like, you know, we're in a brave, scary new world right now, and who knows sort of where sort of the technology takes us. But I don't see a world where humans aren't involved in this process, where humans aren't involved in at least designing and directing what's happening. And you think about those things that require a high level of trust. I'm making a foundational technology decision for my business. I'm choosing a new methodology for our sales team to go and follow. I've gotten all this insights from ChatGPT about what I should do with my bum knee, but am I going to purely trust the AI, or do I want a human doctor, to validate the decision I should make? Right. I think it changes the course of that information gathering and insight building on the patient level, as well as the doctor and and the clinic level. But I think we still want a human involved in that process, and so it changes the jobs to be done a little bit. But I think you sort of go back to sort of how and why people are making decisions. It's a key part of making that work. You've heard me say it already once today: strategy first, process second, technology third. And we spend a lot of time with our clients sort of really focused on fundamentals. Look, we all need to hit our number. We all have numbers we're trying to hit. Like, we're sitting here doing this, including today, Andre. I got 5 days left in the month, 5 days left in the quarter. We're here at Heinz Marketing. We're close to hitting our number. Every hour matters at the end of the day. So, like, you feel like you're sort of in let's just execute mode. And then you get to the next quarter and the next quarter, and you're just like, it sometimes feels like fire drill. You gotta build the plane for it to be able to stay in the air long term. And this gets down to just knowing and executing on the fundamentals. What's the market I'm going after? What's the subset of the market that I'm going after? How well do I understand which of those segments are performing best for me? Am I willing to, again, addition by subtraction, narrow my focus to increase my conversion rate? We worked with a company a couple of years ago that was selling a CRM, an SMB CRM. So, like, it was kind of a stripped down CRM system for all our businesses. And we were seeing success overall and improvements in pipeline development. But we sort of, at one point, we broke down what was working well in acquisition, what was working well in retention, where were we seeing the greatest lifetime value. And we found that home services companies, roofers, painters, contractors, were the most successful, happiest customers of this software. And so it allowed us to not only double down on the marketing we did in those segments, but it changed the economics. We were seeing 3x lifetime value for companies in those home services spaces. So that allowed us to actually go spend more money to acquire them, knowing that the lifetime value would be longer. So I think really sort of investing in those fundamentals of, like, who am I selling to? Who are the people in those organizations? Getting creative and more diverse in terms of who's in the buying committee, and then mapping that out in a buying process so you can actually start to execute components of that. And the execution phases are not just, download a white paper, get a demo. We talk about signals, and oftentimes when we say signals, we say or we mean intent signals. And too often, I think we put all signals into this intent signal bucket. To me, intent means like intent to engage, intent to buy. Like, there's an intent on the prospect side. Many of your prospects aren't at the intent level yet. Previous to intent signals are pain signals. Where do you see examples of the pain that exists that someone may not be pursuing solutions for, but that pain is a signal you can respond to. That pain is a signal you can respond to with sort of associated value added content. And prior to pain, there's evidence. Evidence signals might be my favorite signals because they allow you to go in and create value and have a presence with prospects early and often without pitching. There's some great data, about a year and a half old now, but I think it's still fundamentally important, from Kerry Cunningham at 6 Sense. And he shows that your prospects don't want to talk to you until they're like 70% into the sales process. We've seen similar data and research like that forever. But they just don't want to hear from you before that, right? And we think that if we could just get to them, we can accelerate this process. If we could just get them on the phone, if we can just have our SDR get 15 minutes, then we can make a case to move this forward. That is not the case. We are not going to force feed that conversation to happen. They don't want to talk to you. But if you identify evidence that there is pain, and you understand your customers buying journey well enough to know that this is the beginning of a process where they are going to eventually recognize patterns of that evidence, to recognize and name the pain. And eventually that pain will be something that they realize they need to do something about. That becomes a commitment to change. And now we're in a sales process of talking to vendors. Great. What can I do with that evidence? How do I start to stitch that together to accelerate the conversion of evidence, of groups of evidence into understanding and quantifying the pain that your prospect may or may not have known that they had? That's value deposits, right? That is creating value and establishing value and helping your prospects understand a problem and have confidence in whether they understand that problem. Back to this confidence thing. If I'm experiencing problems and don't yet know what that means, my confidence erodes. If I start to understand the patterns and recognize, at least even if I haven't solved the problem, but if I have problems and know what the problem is, I can start to have solutions. Like one of my favorite shows that my wife and I watch at night now is Homestead Rescue. I think it was on a long time ago, and we're just catching up. But it's basically like, it's a group of people that are helping homesteaders like improve their ability to live off the land and live off the grid. It's kind of fun. And every once in a while, they will have sort of a livestock problem. They'll be like, hey, we had chickens and our chickens are getting picked off. Our livestock is getting decimated. There's something out there getting it. And sometimes one of the guys on the crew says, like, before I can solve this problem, I have to know what is attacking this, right? So their evidence is like, we're losing our chickens. If you get that and to figure out, like, is it a bobcat? Is it a coyote? Is it eagles? Like, you have to know what the problem is to be able to then say, okay, now I can address the problem. And oftentimes, once you know what the problem is, you're like, oh, well, there's solutions for this problem. We can build a trap for this, right? There's a bit of a non sequitur. A coyote will continue to come back to your chickens all the time because they know that's a reliable source of chickens. But a bobcat, if it comes and has a problem, or it gets hurt, or sort of there's some danger, it won't come back again. So you have a different solution for keeping a bobcat from coming than keeping a coyote from coming. My long story medium there is find the points of evidence, help your prospect identify what the problem is. You're already on your way towards building velocity, towards needing a solution to solve that problem. This is a workflow. This is a progression. This is something you can document. And if you can document it, you can identify the jobs to be done by your technology, by your agentic tools, by your BDRs, by your marketing team, by your content. A little bit, Caroline. I think too often we do overthink things, but I also know that complex problems and complex solutions still come down to, what do I do next? What needs to happen next? What needs to be said next? What does a prospect need to understand next? Like, we keep thinking we can just, like, if we get the right tool or the right message, they're just going to get it and they're going to buy tomorrow. Like, not happening. All of our work boils down to, what do we do next? And the better you can document that, the better you're going to be able to track what's working and what's not at the tactical level. And the better you're going to be able to repeat that. Again, like rivers, man. I mean, I need a steady river throughout my business, and different rivers doing different things. But building this architecture allows you to execute on this go-to-market flow, allows you to see steady, predictable results, allows you to know and see what's not working and make changes to that. Yes, I don't have a bobcat problem. I do have a coyote problem, Vladimir. And we have solved that through a combination of electric fences and other solutions that sort of keep the coyotes out. But, they're still out there. So you always got to be vigilant. All right, wrapping up a little bit here. I'm kind of hopefully get to some Q&A here, but I got a couple more slides I want to do first. Quality over quantity. This is the ones I feel like Andre, we're going to talk about this forever. I don't care how long, we try to eliminate the MQLs. I think MQLs are a vanity metric, but God bless, the Serious Decisions and John Miller and everybody else for sort of convincing us that this was a metric we should watch. And they were so good at convincing us that we should be watching those that board members and leadership teams are still worshiping at the altar of the MQL and like that up and to the right chart. More is better. No, it's not. If you are focused on more, you're going to dilute what you've put into those rivers and what you put into your systems. And making this change in the organization is not a dashboard change. It is not a definition change. It is a culture change. If you all of a sudden send fewer leads to the sales team, they're going to still ask for more leads. You're going to have to point out that the majority of those leads were crap and didn't do anything. Like I remember my very first client 18 years ago. There's no Heinz marketing. It was just me doing stuff, right, as a consultant. And went in, looked at a lot of the data that they had, and sat in front of the sales team and said, "I'm going to turn off about 80% of our paid search. So about 80% of the leads you're getting from paid search are no longer going to exist." And before they threw me out the window, I showed them the data. And the data said that most of the leads they were getting were not converting at all. And that when we had instituted some cold call power hours, and we built programs around it saying, like, this segment based on that went to this event, we're going to make these calls. They were far more productive at generating pipeline from those cold call power hours than we were for those 80% of leads, right? And so if I'm a sales team, like, I want leads, but I really just want to hit my number. So if you can point out that these leads are crap, right? I mean, if you really want to get existential, like I say, like, your sales team doesn't really need leads either. What they really need is a market that craves what you're selling, a market that craves an answer to a problem that they understand. So if I'm a marketer, like if I'm a pipeline marketer, I need to generate pipeline, but I also need to be obsessed with product market fit. We spent a whole nother hour just talking about why that's important, right? Leads are a manifestation. Leads are a lagging indicator of product market fit in a market that demands what you're doing. So I would highly encourage you to think about how to have those conversations internally about what's really most important. Not all leads are created equal, and the quality of those leads is important. One of the best ways to do that is to make sure that what you are measured on in marketing is as close to the money as possible. If all you're focused on is clicks, likes, and impressions and views of your videos, or even leads, if leads is a primary metric, which it's 2026, still a primary metric for a lot of organizations, it's going to reward your team for volume, and volume does not equal quality, and that's a slippery slope. So still really important. It's amazing how much companies will address some of the workflow challenges and the architecture challenges, and yet a board is still like, why are leads down? So you got to make sure you address all of these. So as we kind of wrap up, kind of what I wanted to be able to sort of present today, some things we're seeing overall. Look, let's not ignore the fact that growth pressure is up. Pressure has always been high, but this year more than the last 2 or 3 years, the expectation is that the clouds have cleared a bit. The expectation is that the market is ripe for growth again. And so, you could, in the midst of the pandemic, you could use the pandemic as an excuse. I remember back in 2008, you could use the financial crisis as an excuse. 2 years ago, a lot of the VCs and private equity firms said, "Oop, winter is coming. I want you to batten down the hatches." You could use that as an excuse. Those excuses are all gone. So growth pressure is up, expectations are down. You have a board telling you in many cases, well, I read this article that Anthropic, became a $25 trillion company with just one marketer. Why can't we do that? So there's all kinds of fake news out there as well. The best companies are facing that head on. They're subtracting strategically from the work that they're doing. They're investing in orchestration and workflow discipline across their teams. They're focused on the right math and the right metrics that are closer to the money. They're focused on human trust and confidence, not just trust in each other and not just people's trust in you, but people's trust in themselves. And as we increase the complexity of our go-to-market motions, as we see more and more moving parts, some of which are automated, some of which are just directed, the fundamentals behind this, in many cases, just the product marketing fundamentals are going to continue to be the bedrock you need to be building your go-to-market motions on moving forward. So, just questions that we kind of encourage a lot of CMOs to ask is, are you positioned to take advantage of these trends? Are you in a place where you can do this? If you're not, or if you look at some of these and say, like, where are there friction points between you now and doing some of these things? Like, what's the source of that friction, and how can you just go at it head on? have direct, open, honest conversations about what isn't working and where you need to make constraints. Find the safe place to start that. If the safe place is not yet your board or your CEO, do it with a peer. It might be with a sympathetic head of sales. The first step you may have is that instead of doing leadership reporting on pipeline as sales and marketing separately, maybe you start to do it together because you have a shared language and you have a shared expectation of what's working. Start somewhere to start to take advantage of these opportunities. So that's what I wanted to share today. This is how to get a hold of me if you have any questions. I mentioned the CMOs guide to marketing orchestration. Happy to get that to you. I think, Andre Vladimir, I think you guys have these slides or have this as a PDF. So feel free to grab those as well. But I kind of was focused on talking and not as much on the content. So not sure if there's any other questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Matt. We do have one question here in the Q&A section. Let me share it here on the screen. From Aaron, dashboards that can predict what to do next or what to improve. Is there a practical application for that in real time?
Well, I think that's the job of the dashboard, right? Is to show what's working, what's not. In terms of predicting what's to do next, I think that comes down to a combination of the analytics you have, as well as your understanding of the buying journey, understanding of the funnel, understanding of how buyers buy. I think one of our biggest sort of blind points is as marketers is not just defining the process we want to follow, not just defining the sales stages we want to go through, but truly understanding how a buyer buys. Right. So, for example, we are up almost to the end of a contract with our marketing automation platform, and so we've been spending some time thinking about like what do we want to continue to do, and and so I've got a head of biz ops that owns this conversation. She's been giving updates and talking about where we are, and we're getting towards the end of it, and almost every vendor says like, "Hey, we need to get on a call with Matt. Like Matt needs to be part of this process." No, he does not. Right? Because I've got an amazing VP of business operations. She's owning this conversation. I have full confidence in her and what she's going and doing on that. And so that's my buying process. Now, if a vendor says, no, our sales process is that we have to go talk to Matt, then that's actually going to kind of piss me off. Like it's going to disrespect the actual decision maker who's not me. And it's going to probably make you less likely to get the deal. So I think some of that predictability in our ability to sort of get better outcomes from our data is not just in our decision making, but our deeper understanding of the dynamics of how your buyers work.
Love it. Thank you so much. I'm wondering if we can just zoom out for a second from your presentation and just think about the entire change management process, right? Because it kind of requires a lot of internal change management. How would you do it step by step, or maybe at least the first steps? Where would you start? Because I feel it's super relevant for everybody who is listening to us right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to keep using the term confidence, right? I think instead of sort of going to your board or going to your leadership team saying, here's how we need to do things moving forward, come to them with receipts. Come to them with evidence, show the results of what other companies are doing and say, like, I want to show you the outcome of a program that another company in a similar space to ours is achieving. And it could be outcomes in terms of pipeline generation. It could be outcomes in terms of consistency of actually hitting your forecast. It could be, greater efficiency of the marketing team and greater satisfaction of the marketing team feeling they're getting things done. So, they're achieving an outcome that we want, right? How are they doing that? Then you can show them how they're doing that. Too many companies do it the other way around. They say like, we need to be more account-based than lead-based. We need to be reporting on pipeline, not leads. We need to no longer look at MQLs. Like we need to redefine how we think about MQLs. You're trying to put out a fire and you're pointing at the flames. You don't put out a fire by pointing at the flames. You put it at the embers, right? What is the actual problem and how did it get solved? So root people in the outcome they care about, and then start to chip away at the means by which you get there. It's still not going to happen in like a 30-minute meeting, especially if, look, you think the buyer's status quo is powerful. The way we operate as sellers, the way we operate in business is status quo. I tell our team all the time, there are no sacred cows in our business in the way that we do things. And yet, our newsletter, we have sort of a one size fits all newsletter that goes to everybody once a month. It goes out the last Tuesday of the month Do you know why it goes out the last Tuesday of the month? Because 17 and a half years ago, I arbitrarily chose the last Tuesday of the month as the day I was going to send the newsletter. And yet that's still what we do, right? And so the status quo is real and very powerful.
Yeah, I feel. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No. This made me think of Ken and his story about internal change measures, like you say. Like, how do we change the status quo? How do we challenge it? How do we actually get the leadership to buy? And he described this process as kind of an internal buyer journey. What you said, like the challenge that status quo. Had a very good approach. But there is like one very specific thing that is making it difficult for teams to work in a different way. And it triggered me when you were talking, it triggered this idea when you were talking about collaboration and, and sales and marketing and other teams. What we see very often is that the root cause of, like, even when the teams want to collaborate, if they have misaligned KPIs, if they are being basically judged and evaluated and compensated based on different KPIs, it's very difficult to align. If you in marketing have a content team that needs to produce a certain amount of pieces of content and maybe is judged by traffic, but then on the other hand, you have field who is like looking at events the way that you described it. Then you have the SDRs who are looking to calls, meetings, whatever, and only maybe account executives who are looking at the revenue as a target. Right. So how do you solve that? Because if you don't solve it, despite the best intent of the people and the teams, it's going to be very difficult to move forward and do things in a different way.
Most companies would immediately just start talking about like dashboards and, sales kickoff and sort of cross-org alignment. You have to treat it as a culture change, and you have to directly address the change management process as part of that. If you go to your digital marketing manager today and you say, listen, you've been gold and you've been tasked with generating as many leads from these channels as possible. I no longer care about that, Susan. I care about generating the right leads. And so I expect us to get fewer leads, but I also need us to increase our discipline around targeting and everything else. Susan's going to freak out because you just changed Susan's job. And instead of thinking about, oh man, this is awesome, we're going to be better producers of the right pipeline, Susan's going to say, I'm not as confident in my ability to do my job today as I was yesterday. I'm not as confident I can deliver on those results because you're asking me to do something different. And now I'm a little worried that I'm not going to be as successful doing it. I'm worried I'm not going to be able to deliver. I'm worried I'm not going to be good at this job. I'm worried I'm not going to keep this job. I'm worried about paying my mortgage next month. I mean, our lizard brains go there very quickly. So when people respond, when people get reactive, when people get a little sort of jumpy or angry, when we try to introduce change, you have to look at that from the perspective of fear. What are they actually fearing? It's the lack of confidence. You have to move them from fear back to confidence. And some of that is simply saying, like, I know I'm asking you to do something different than what you did before. I know this is going to take us time to figure out how to do this. I also have full confidence you're the right person to do this and that you can figure this out and we're going to do it together. And it will break some glass and things will break, things will not work, but we're going to get there and you're the right person to help me do that. So they will experience that fear and that doubt, but do everything you can to manage through that change and give people the confidence they need. Now, there may be people and roles in the organization that you don't need moving forward, depending on what you're changing. You have to manage through that too. But this is a process, and it's not always perfect. And so the way you manage that culture change is going to be extremely important.
And another point to this, I think that is really essential, is the measurement or attribution model, right? Because this is kind of the dark side of B2B marketing. We're all dealing with long sales cycles. At the same time, everybody is pressured, right, to prove marketing impact on revenue. So I believe it's also another essential or vital part of change management, because if you still need to, we all know if your sales cycle is above 6 months, then it's inevitable that you have multiple marketing and sales touch points across multiple channels. It's inevitable that just one click could generate that opportunity, but still for many companies, let's say the last click attribution and marketing versus sales credit is the default GTM status. So what are your thoughts on it and how to fix this?
You just used a word that is poison for most organizations when it comes to this attribution debate, and it is credit. Too many companies, when they're pursuing a perfect attribution model, are trying to figure out who should get credit for a revenue event. Attribution in a complex sales environment is a myth. You're never going to have the full picture. And it is never this channel or that channel. It's never sales versus marketing. It is all. And that is an inconvenient truth that boards don't like to hear and CFOs don't like to hear because they want to have accountability and they want to know what worked. What worked was a lot of things sequenced in the right way to generate an outcome. If we're looking to figure out who got credit, we're looking in the rearview mirror. We can't change what happened in the past. I don't care. That's all sunk cost. The only value in attribution is creating consistent, repeatable outcomes in the future. That's what I'm pursuing. And you're going to do that by consistently creating that body of work, consistently following that sequence of programs over and over again to more people in your pipeline. So attribution as looking at who gets credit for this like 12-month sales cycle is dumb. Understanding which of those steps generated more velocity, which of those steps were successful in helping the buying group to get together, which of those steps were successful in helping build customer confidence so that they could agree to move forward on a discussion. That's where you want to apply attribution, is to understand and have better confidence in segments of the buying journey that can create more predictable outcomes, that can create more predictable forecasts.
Yeah, 100% true. So if I'll just summarize everything, what I've been feeling is that honestly, with everything that is happening right now, I feel that at the end of 2026, we'll come back to whatever it would be, QBR or annual strategy session, and we'll come back to the broken fundamentals. We'll see that AI didn't fix the broken playbook, right? We'll see that misalignment is there, the broken attribution and measurement is there, and ultimately we'll need to change it, because otherwise, I see a lot of people try to build the workarounds, but it's inevitable that at a certain point you'll just say, okay, it's not possible to fix it. We just need to slowly change it, right? How it will work. And then it's like, again, it's better to start these conversations right now, because these are hard and unpleasant conversations everybody wants to avoid, right? But they are vital for the organizational success.
Look, if you avoid the conversation, it's going to come up eventually, and it's going to come up from someone else who's going to frame it in a way you might not like. So it's better for you to enter that conversation on your terms with the points you want to make. And I mean, do it with respect, do it with empathy. Like, I mean, we're all working towards the same objective here. But I think the more you lean into the fact that not everything's working, the more you lean into the board and say, like, this isn't success theater. Here's the problems we have, but here's how I see other companies addressing it. Here's how I see other companies succeeding where we are failing. How do we make a move towards that as well? It's a process, but I think it's better for you to initiate it than to have someone else initiate it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I say, again, probably everybody reads the same reports, right, where we see CMO tenure is plummeting, right? And nowadays it's just less than 18 months. And so the entire point is the fact that or let's say the fact that leadership doesn't have these conversations with us right now also doesn't mean that they won't have these conversations in 2 or 3 months from today. And it doesn't matter if we are AI native or if we're deploying the technology, right? Ultimately, if we don't have the results, then we have a trouble. And then ultimately, this entire summit and your presentation as well gives the solution, because we all subconsciously know that there are fundamental problems that need to be fixed. And the truth is that the earlier we'll start fixing them, the better our organization will be.
You got it.
Thank you so much. It was a brilliant presentation. Guys, we have 1 minute before the next presentation. We have Ashley Faust, VP of Marketing at Atlassian, and she'll have the last presentation for today. Let us know how did you like today's keynote. And our convo, feel free to put just your favorite emoji in the chat. And meanwhile, I will drop a link to Matt's profile on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect and follow him. He's always sharing fantastic content.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for being here.
Thank you so much, and stay tuned. In 30 seconds, we are going to have the last keynote for today, and appreciate your feedback, guys. Cheers.